If you're facing a challenge, maybe it's a challenge they haven't dealt with before, or maybe it's a big challenge. You have to be able to paint the picture of what the other side of the hill looks like. Hey, this is where we're headed. This is what we're wanting to accomplish.
Welcome to the Good Stewards Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to seasoned real estate investors who want to maximize the cash flow potential in their business. We are buy and hold investors with 1,000+ properties and markets across the U.S. who bring an insider's view into the nitty-gritty details of real estate investing. If you're looking to develop the mindset, teams, and systems that can dramatically build your real estate business and net worth, you're in the right place.
Welcome to this episode of the Good Stewards Podcast. I'm Ryan Dossie.
I'm Amanda Perkins.
I'm Bill Sirius.
And I'm Andrew Sirius.
Hello, Good Stewards. Your business is really only ever going to be as good as the team that you have behind it. And hopefully we get you to the point that you have a team and you're not just doing kind of this solo-preneur thing. And really casting vision, inspiring that team, and leading your team is absolutely critical to maintain momentum as you grow. I'm looking forward to really covering this topic because, as we all know, business and success, unfortunately, is not just like an elevator ride to the top. You're going to have starts and stops and pushing it back uphill and downhill. And I think this is super important when you're at a valley to be able to lead your team back to the top of the hill. But before we dive back in, we do actually want to hear from you. It's not just something we say. Be sure to visit us over at thegoodstewards.com, subscribe, snag your free copy of our ebook. Obviously, make sure you tell your friends about us. Leave us a review. And if you have any questions, get those over and we'll make sure we get them answered for you. So kind of kicking this episode off, I want to dive into why it's important to have your team really be on board and kind of what that looks like. There's certain roles in your company that it's kind of just like a, show up, do the job, punch in, punch out. And that could be something like, say, maintenance. I think we would all agree that that's really not what we're looking for, though. We really want the people in our organization to be on board with what we're trying to do. I'll give a good example from property management that we had this past week. We had an application come over, and our first initial pass was like, nope, decline. And reason being, they didn't really have good rental history. They were late on some bills, and their credit wasn't ideal. I think it was like mid-low 500s. So our initial gut reaction was, this person's probably not going to be a good fit. Let's just pass. The person overseeing our property management, though, chose to dig in a little bit and ask more questions. And what we ended up finding out was their previous housing was actually paid for by a nonprofit that they worked for. And they were there for 5 years. And the nonprofit was actually moving them to town. And through opening the dialogue with the actual director of the program for our state, not only did they inform us that, kind of how it works and that the bills will be paid, but they even actually co-signed on the lease and went so far as to say, if for some reason they just default, we'll pay out the balance of the rest of the lease. We want these people to be out here working with us so bad that we'll go on the hook for them, right? So I would say that's kind of the difference between just like, oh, yep, nope, this one doesn't fit the criteria, move on, to caring enough to dive in a little bit. Bill, Amanda, Andrew, do you guys have any other good examples of a team member going above and beyond because they're really on board with this thing?
Well, okay. So what we're always looking for is somebody who, they have their job description. Everybody has a job description, but what you can't put on a job description are all of the things that we also want them to do. And then, to kind of take ownership of what they're doing and help out with everything else, and not just sit there and say, got my 12 things on my list done. I'm going to phone it in for the rest of the day till I can punch a clock and go home. And so, when we're usually, hiring, we're really looking for people who are looking to grow in our organization. We just had an instance where we brought on a new receptionist in our Eugene location. And, she's a recent college graduate, not a ton of work experience, but what she put in that role was she did her reception job, but then she was also looking for other ways to improve the organization. And if we gave her a task, she would complete it to the end, see it through. And so what we ended up just recently doing was hiring a new receptionist and moving her to a different position that has a little more room to grow, because we wanted her to not be stuck in a position that she didn't want to be at long term. We want to retain her. We like what she was bringing to the organization. We like that she brought more to the organization than just the list of duties that were on her job description. So, and that's huge. Everywhere we're looking for that.
Yeah, I think we can give a shout out to Emma, who is this person. And I would call Emma a capacity person. I think this is, I'm quoting somebody else and I'm not sure who it is, but there's a difference between a cul-de-sac person and a capacity person. A cul-de-sac person can kind of, well, you know what a cul-de-sac is. You kind of find, you get there and you kind of have some limited options, but you do your thing and you are adequate and you go home and you flip on the TV and go from there. But a capacity person, I think, says in their heart of hearts, I'm going to improve myself and I'm going to improve this organization and I'm going to move up. Now, they might not even think that consciously, but that's just who they are. And that's the kind of person that you're looking for in any position, because none of this stuff that we do is rocket science, really. I mean, if it is, then all of us would have to bow out, because only a very, very small slice of the population can do neurosurgery and rocket science. But most of what we do are tasks that are repeatable, learnable, improvable, everything else. And yet it's the person's attitude and their ability to say, I'm not going to just do what's been assigned to me. I'm going to go over and above. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's the ability to show up and execute with excellence repeatably, not just the first week they're there.
That's Jim Collins. And that analogy has never worked for me. Like, what does capacity have to do with cul-de-sacs? It should be like cul-de-sac and like
it's a freeway. For crying out loud. They're both C's. Maybe.
No, okay. I think another thing is there's just, you can kind of like the one good way I've heard is like, do you give your busiest person the job that you need done, or your least busy person? And often it's the busiest person who will get it done better. It's the one, if you have that feeling like, even though this person has got a ton on their plate, but they can handle more, or they're the one I would trust with this project. That's kind of a sign of that's the kind of person you want. Somebody who's also not just going to pass off tough decisions, or they'll come to you with a suggestion. They'll come to you with a solution. Like, I need your approval for this, but this is my suggestion. Not, oh, what do? I have no idea. Or is willing to talk to an upset customer and not try to get you involved to take that off their plate. That we have our property manager, Preston, is great about that. That he'll deal with the worst of the worst when it comes into sometimes legitimate complaints, often just irrational anger, and he'll deal with that without involving us. And that's something when somebody's willing to take that on, you can tell that they have an ownership in your company. They have an ownership in where it's going, and they want to move up and be a part of that. They're not just there to collect a paycheck. And because if somebody's just there to collect a paycheck, why would they tolerate being yelled at? And if they're or why would they want to deal with that? If they can pass it off to you or someone else in any sort of way that lets them save face, they'll do so. And so those are things I think that are important to look for.
I think another good thing to highlight there is we're looking for people that are buying in. They're taking on an owner mentality while they're not an owner. Right? They're a salaried or even an hourly employee. And one of the best ways I've seen to tell if somebody really has that or not is, are they willing to go above and beyond, like Amanda mentioned? Their stuff is done. Are they willing to put on other hats and get other stuff done that needs done? To quote the Bible, if you want to be the greatest, you have to serve. You have to be willing to do the stuff that other people aren't willing to do. And I think that's one of those key things to look out for when you're hiring, but even in your staff. So what does buying in actually mean, right? That's kind of one of those are you with us or not, right? And one of the best ways I've seen to do this is, are they on board with your mission statement? And what a mission statement is, if you don't have one, that's really what you're looking to accomplish as a business. Now, most of us got into business ideally to turn a profit, but that can't be all that it is. If it's just about making money, there's other ways to make good money with less stress.
Maybe we should address why making money cannot be your mission statement. And I would say that is not a rallying cry to motivate people over the long haul. Yeah, everybody needs to make money and we want to make as much as we can. But if that is the gist of what your organization is all about, how does that motivate anybody who's a little bit outside of that circle of making money?
How does that motivate a hourly employee at $9 an hour or whatever?
Or the people that you're serving, if they see that it's all about money for you, you make choices that are in your interest, but not in their interest oftentimes. So it can't be about making money as a central core of your mission statement. Just take it out if it's in there.
I think one of my favorite memes I've ever seen is a guy sitting on the hood of a Lamborghini, and it's him talking to one of his employees and says, I was able to buy this car after all these years of hard work. And if you keep showing up, putting in the effort and, really giving it your all to your job, I'll be able to buy another one next year. Right? Like that's not going to get people on board. So a mission statement, could be something like, we want to take distressed assets, renovate them and turn them into affordable housing for the communities we grew up in. That's so much more powerful than just, dollar bills, y'all, like we're here to get paid. Right. Interestingly enough, in like Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, the big thing that convinces these world-class people to jump ship, to give up stock options or go work with other firms, truly is the mission statement of what are you setting out to accomplish. So I'll give you guys a quick run through of stewardships. So Stewardship Properties' mission statement for our residents is to serve people in their housing needs, for our private lenders and investors to wisely invest their funds, giving them a good return for its use, for our sellers, vendors, and contractors to treat them in a respectful, straightforward, and ethical way, for our partners to work on their behalf so together we substantially benefit, to our staff and field team to create wealth, enabling increased and unexpected opportunities. I don't know about you guys, but that gets me a little bit more fired up than, hey, you can show up and make $12.50 an hour. And if it goes well after 90 days, we're going to bump you by $1 or $2. So setting a mission statement and making sure it's known, making sure this isn't something you can just do once and put on a shelf. It's something that when, quote unquote, when stuff hits the fan, this is what you're going to go back to of, why are we doing all of this? Why are we going to put in this work? Andrew mentioned the property manager. I wish I could sit here and tell you, as somebody who owns rentals, that every single person you lease to is going to be rational. They're going to be fair. They're going to pay their bills on time, and they're going to complain or register, issues in a polite manner. In my experience, that has not ever really been the case. So if you have somebody that's kind of on the front lines taking that heat, there needs to be a reason that they're there doing that work, other than, quite frankly, to just get paid. So that being said, kind of in my experience, some key questions to ask when you're kind of pulling together a mission statement. The first one is just why. Like, why do you as an entrepreneur want to get started in real estate investing? Is it to build wealth? Is it to leave something behind for your kids? Is it because you're in a part of town and you see just distressed assets all over the place?
Is it more philanthropic? Like, are there philanthropy issues that you feel like needs addressed? In order for you to do those, you do have to build the wealth and create a cash flow,
Absolutely.
Lots of things.
That's one of my huge ones. There's causes I'm passionate about that I know $1,000 check doesn't even put a dent into, right? So figuring out kind of what drives you. One of the most beautiful, incredible whys I've ever seen. There's a real estate investor I know who the whole reason they got into real estate investing, and this is fix and flip, wholesaling and rentals, they literally fund an orphanage overseas every single month, single-handedly as a family. Like, they know if they're not profitable, people literally don't get fed, right? Is it providing a good life for your employees, your staff? I love, Bill's kind of take on unexpected opportunities. I think the other thing to get clear on is, why you're doing it, but how are you going to do it? Hey, I want to fix up, the neighborhood. Okay, cool. Are you going to sweep the sidewalks, or are you going to, buy the trap houses on the corners and get them fixed up and cleaned out? And, anybody else have any other thoughts on creating the mission statement?
Yeah, let me give a shout out to our ebook. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to give you a page number here for you to go to take a look at other people's mission statements. Page 230 of our ebook is, let me just give you a couple examples. What do you think
Amazon's if you have it on there, Bill?
Yeah, I'll do Amazon's, but what do you think Disney's is? To make people happy. Amazon, to be the world's most consumer-centric company. Nike, to build inspiration, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete, and then in parentheses, every person in the world. Here's one I like, Wikipedia. What do you think their mission statement is? I love this.
To know everything.
To know absolutely everything.
That's my mission statement as a man.
Get rid of Britannica Encyclopedia and World Book. No. Imagine a world in which every single person is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. That's enough to get me online and make a contribution to Wikipedia, which I did recently.
I believe that's propaganda. Their actual mission statement is to empower a bunch of online Stalinists who want to ruthlessly control a page of Wikipedia for some reason.
Andrew's Wikipedia doesn't read nice.
Anyway, I would really encourage you. This is chapter 13 of our ebook is all about a mission, being mission-minded. And that I'd encourage you to go there.
I'd also, I'm not going to get into it too much because, quite frankly, it's a whole nother episode. But the other thing you want to really have established are your core values. And that's as an organization, what is it that you are looking for in your employees, in your business dealings, and what can your employees hold you accountable to? Something I highly, highly recommend you take the time to do. It's one of those things that feels kind of silly to have 4 or 5 character traits that you really champion, but it honestly, as a business, makes hiring, firing, and promoting extremely easy. Mine, if you're curious, ours are EPIC, so excellence, personal responsibility, individual development, and community. So if somebody's gossiping, they're gone, right?
Yeah, Ryan, what I would say that's really important and very difficult is when you're having to evaluate somebody who's producing. They're a high producer. They're doing the X's and O's. You look at the flow chart, you look at whatever their role
your
is.
KIPs, your matrix, they're hitting all of their numbers.
Yeah, they are. And yet the attitude, the lack of being team oriented is just kind of poisoning the well in your organization or in the culture that you're trying to build. And you have to make the really difficult decision to ask them to find another source of employment.
Absolutely.
That is agonizing.
Yeah, no, it's, I won't sit here and let me rephrase. It doesn't make hiring and firing easy. It just gives you an accurate and fair litmus test. And honestly, I would even on the flip side say, if you have business partners or C-level employees, it also allows them to do the same thing back, though. I've had times where my staff have literally been like, hey, you're not really showing up with excellence right now. Or, your individual development has been awful, right? Like you're not growing as a person. So I would highly recommend just mapping those out. There's plenty of good exercises for it that we don't have time for right
one
now.
other thing too, the boss always gets treated the best. And I've fallen into this trap so often. I say, well, that gal, that guy, they're great. They're great. They're doing a good job and they have a wonderful attitude. Yeah, towards me, they do, but as I dig a little deeper, that is not the case with other people. And so people hate to tattletale on others. And I don't want a culture of tattletaling necessarily, but I do want the feedback of their colleagues about everybody's colleagues about how they're doing, because they're going to treat me, or if you're the boss, they're going to treat you the best. Everybody else is going to come in a peg lower.
I would also say on that same note, if you have somebody who's been with you for a long time and you have a newer employee, and even if you really, really like that new employee, I'll be super honest about a mistake here and actually a public apology I'll make for Amanda. We had an employee in Indianapolis that I adored. I was very impressed with. She felt like a great culture fit. Everybody liked her, always very bubbly. And Amanda came out, met with her, and Amanda understands her job better than I did. And Amanda said, hey, she's got to go. And I said no. I was very firm. No, I like this person. They're doing a good job. They're showing up. And it was 2 months after the fact, we ended up letting the person go, and they were overpaying our bills. This is something that's somewhat important, right?
Or not paying them at all.
Or not paying them.
Yeah. And we found out, unfortunately, she just didn't pay any of her utility bills for 2 months. So all of a sudden now across 100+ units, most of which we're not paying utilities on, but vacants and properties that we're doing construction on, like the power just starts getting disconnected. And it's not an issue if the money wasn't there. She just stopped doing her job. So with that being said, regardless of whether you like somebody, or I would even go a little bit further. If you just made a hire you needed to make, and you really don't want to go back to not having that hole filled, but you're getting feedback from long-termers that this isn't a good fit. Bill has always told me, and it's now become one of my slogans, I've never fired somebody and thought, geez, I wish I would have not done that as long as I did. Or you get the point. I've never fired somebody and thought, geez, I'm glad I waited that long. So that being said, with your core values, you also have to take feedback from your employees, whether it's something you want to hear or not, because as Bill put it, as the owner, as the boss, they're going to give you I'm doing everything for you. And then they may not be treating other people that same way. So kind of moving forward on that note, as a business owner, as a real estate investor, as an entrepreneur, it is your responsibility to cast vision for your company, for your staff, and even with yourself. And I'm going to give a couple kind of quick practical uses of this. So with staff, for instance, if you're facing a challenge, maybe it's a challenge they haven't dealt with before, or maybe it's a big challenge. You have to be able to paint the picture of what the other side of the hill looks like. Hey, this is where we're headed. This is what we're wanting to accomplish. Something like,
we may be going through it right now, but ultimately we want to be here, and let's imagine what there looks like while we're getting through from here to there. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's for anybody who's, in the gym, if you're ever running or something, I lie to myself constantly of like, oh, just one more lap, just one more block. It's kind of that of like, but ultimately where are we headed? Where are we trying to end up? Especially if you're using general contractors, if you're not GCing your own projects, this is so important to not only do it in writing. I actually learned from Andrew, we need to write our own scopes, but you have to be able to paint the picture with a general contractor of what you want this thing to look like.
Let me give you a really quick example. And this is something that's easy to overlook, but one of our properties, we, it was to redo the shower. And so it had to be gutted. It was just a stand-up shower. And the contractor put the faucet, the nozzle in the faucet pointed directly out towards you rather than on one side or the other. And it's kind of like, when I saw it, I said, oh my gosh, you mean I have to be that specific? In other words, when you turn on the water, it just blasts right into you outside of the shower, right into the bathroom.
It's a fun way to start your morning at 5 a.m.
So it's kind of like, oh my God. So, I mean, that now needs to be changed, but it should never have been an issue. And yet, if you're starting from scratch and you just got to be very specific. And when Ryan says paint the picture, it's like paint it in.
This is
pixels.
a vivid picture. Yeah. I had a similar one where we remodeled a kitchen and we get done and there's no backsplash and it's going to be a rental property. And I'm like, we have painted drywall behind a sink and behind a stove. You don't think that's going to have spaghetti on it in a week? Like that, like to me, I was like, that's illogical that we didn't budget for backsplash, that you didn't have that in here, right? My biggest rehab mistake I ever made was with a new sub that came highly recommended on a property I no longer own. And we had our scope and everything. And at the end of the day, it was like rent ready. And or rent ready was the picture we painted. This is what we're wanting, but we weren't specific enough. And that like, oh, well, I didn't think you wanted doors on the closets. Well, of course I want doors on the closets. Why would I have a closet with no doors? Oh, I didn't think you wanted outlet covers. Well, of course we need outlet covers,
or returns
right?
on your screen doors, that's just flapping in the wind when the thing opens. And
you just cannot assume that somebody knows your vision. And this is an unfortunate example from my youth, but my very first job was as a telephone answering service operator. And we answered for a lot of medical clinics. And we had a particularly snotty doctor. And he was always just really mean to us. And I mean, I was 16 years old. So I was pretty young. And I said something along the lines of, well, I assumed. And he said to me, you never assume. It makes an ass out of you and me. And I've never forgotten that. And I'm a lot older than 16 years now, but I will always remember the doctor that said that to me. It made me feel like complete garbage. I still feel like garbage because I wouldn't talk to people like that, but you can never assume. Like you have to paint your vision so impeccably that you don't have to go back and be like, oh, well, I thought you would know that wasn't done. And I thought you would know because it seems such a reasonable thing. But if you didn't outline that vision with, whoever we're talking about, people can't read your mind and they don't know what you were thinking because, in the case, some real estate investors would be fine with the shower there or no backsplash or no outlet covers. And that might be fine for some. It's not our standards, but you can apply that for a lot of things in our business. Actually, I think one of the 4 agreements is don't make assumptions. It can be used that way, but also in don't make assumptions about what other people are thinking or their intentions. But in this case too, it's just never assume that somebody understands your vision or where you want to get to.
Particularly with contractors. Contractors are not experts in feng shui, and really going there after the fact, regardless of how specific your scope is, you need to go there after the fact. You need to go through it. You need to check on, make sure every item is complete. Even our best contractors usually have a couple things here or there that they need to go back and finish. And so you need to implement a quality check program as well as putting together detailed scopes of work up front. And don't pay out until they finished every item. And so it's just kind of, don't rely on anyone to fulfill your vision, but most specifically, don't rely on contractors.
Well, and it's a thing thing of beauty when they start picking up on your system and they start sensing that you want to do things with excellence, because I think they want to take pride in what they do. Obviously, they're all about efficiency because another day on the job is dollars lost out the door for them. But if they grab a hold of this vision, and it's the people that you want to continue to hire that will, then I think there's a sense of pride for them. They work for an organization that's all about excellence, and they want to have an excellent product that they leave behind as well.
Ryan, how do you tie that vision back, like, to yourself, casting your vision within yourself and as an entrepreneur?
I would say it's not so much as casting vision for yourself. It's setting the vision or visualizing where you want to end up, right? I work with a lot of different real estate investors, entrepreneurs. There's literally hundreds of businesses my companies serve a month. And it's funny how people tend to pick buzzwords, right? So as entrepreneurs, it's like, oh, I want to own a 6-figure business. Like, well, what's the difference between owning a $99,000 a year and a $100,000 business? Nothing really. A lot of real estate investors, it's, well, I want to buy my first property. And then it's, well, my goal is 10. And then it's 100. And then it's, well, let's go 250 or 500 or 1,000. So a lot of the times I feel like people tend to kind of set almost goals or vision for themselves without really thinking it through of what are they actually wanting? Where are they wanting to end up, right? So making sure you don't fall into that like buzzwordy trap of like, oh, I want to own a 7-figure business, or, I want to own $1 million worth of real estate. Well, if you own $1 million worth of real estate and it's all farm ground that bleeds you dry and you can't lease it, what's the point, right? So I would actually I love sharing our mistakes because I just feel like there's a lot people can learn from them. Bill and I like getting good deals. So much so that we needed office furniture, and Bill bought an entire bank's worth of office furniture for my poor staff to move with like 4 hours notice, right? But it was a great deal, right? We had a partner that we worked with who we don't really work with anymore, that, the acquisition was what he was focused on. And it was like, wow, I now own 10 rentals, but then they weren't managed. Projects weren't finished, places weren't leased. And ultimately we ended up having to liquidate those assets. So as you're casting vision for yourself as a real estate investor, I would be very specific of, I want, X amount of properties that cash flow by X amount a door. And I'm not talking theoretical cash flow. If I look at a 12-month or a 2-year P&L, this is what I'm after. Going at it with that level of, I think, specificity.
And Andrew, I think you have something about the difference between creating goals and habits, maybe, or
systems.
Systems. Yeah, there you go.
You never know exactly where an opportunity is going to come from. And so creating a system to basically run your business versus a particular goal, like let's say your goal is to buy 20 properties. Well, if you're nearing the end of the year and you're at 8, do you just buy garbage? The goal is sort of, but at the same time, you might, if you have put in place a very strong system for finding properties, rehabbing them, financing the rest, you might find a package of 97 or something like that. Although our systems weren't that well set up when we did find that package. One of the episodes we talk about that. You can go look through that. I'm sorry, I don't have it on the top of my head. I think Scott Adams has talked about this a lot. It's goals are you are always in a state of pre-success failure, or perhaps pre-failure failure. You're never actually there. Like, you will never, because as soon as you actually accomplish a goal, you're just going to want to set another one. And so goals, I think, have a place. They're kind of like, we're looking for this, this is what we're trying to get to. We're trying to accomplish this particular task, but it's more of they should be smaller. You should be looking at building systems for this. We send out this many letters a week. We go through this particular process on our rehabs. We put the scope of work together. We put it out for bid. We measure the contractor's performance. We do our quality checks, et cetera. We have our property management systems. These are our screening criteria. This is how, this is the quality they need to be in, the type of pictures. We put them up on the website. This is our financing criteria. We're trying to finance up front with 8 to 9%. We're trying to meet with different people to see if we can find potential private lenders. We're refinancing on the back end with different banks. We're doing the things to get them, and we're just kind of chugging along. And then we're looking for potential opportunities that come. Build those systems and just move forward and look less at specific goals and more of building the system to fulfill opportunities that you might not even be thinking of. I think that's a better way to approach things. Probably worth an episode in itself.
No, I think that's a really good point of, it's kind of hard to measure something that is you've either hit it or not. So if your goal is to buy one rental property and you don't do it, well, that sucks. You failed, right? Whereas if your goal is to analyze the opportunities that make sense for you, make offers that make sense for you, and only purchase assets that you can burr out of that are cash flowing, that's a much, much more realistic, it's not just, hey, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And I would even say the fruit of that system is going to be accomplishing the deal as opposed to only looking at the outcome and not really how you're going to get there. On that note, I think we're going to give this one a wrap. I appreciate you guys tuning in to this episode. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, share, make sure you snag a free copy of our ebook. Visit us over at thegoodstewards.com for more info. Submit any questions or topics you'd like us to talk about. Talk to y'all next time.